Welcome to the Real Faith Conversations on the One Name Church podcast. This is a moment where we have real conversations about our faith in Jesus. We're so glad you're joining us today. Wherever you are listening from, it is our hope that these conversations would inspire you to have real faith in Jesus. So hope you're ready because we're about to get real.
What is up, family? Glad that you are here today on this edition of our Real Faith Conversation. And we have special guests with us here today. These are members of our team here at One Name Church. And introduce yourself. We'll start over here with this swaggy looking guy. Tell us who you are and what you do at One Name Church.
So my name is Moses, and I am the youth director at One Name Church. So I take care of all the youth kids, amazing youth kids, I should say.
You got to have the energy.
The special youth kids.
Come on. We love you. We're thankful for that. All right. What about over here? This lovely young woman over here.
So my name is Jessica, and I help lead the prayer team at One Name.
Let's go. And Jess also leads this podcast right here, this conversation. She is the producer, so she makes sure we know what we're doing. Come on, somebody.
We're not muted.
Yeah, we're not muted and we're all good. So hopefully you can hear us right now, and we're just glad that you are here. And I asked them to join me here today to talk on the topic of generosity. Both these amazing people have testimonies that we're going to get into about generosity, but I really want to talk about generosity today because I believe that's something that a lot of us as followers of Jesus and even the church, we really you either have two options behind it. You either have been taught well and you're living it out, or you've been taught bad and you don't, and it's been ruined by your example of it, and you don't, because generosity with time, talent, and treasures, you either do one of them, you do two of them, or you're good with your time and your talents, but you're not good with your money because people get weird about money. So we're going to talk about that today and just talk about that. I'm going to set some foundation of where we're going to go. We've taught about generosity a lot, but I just want to say some things, and then we're going to dive into and get their wisdom and knowledge on it. Is this, just so we all know this to set the foundation. Generosity is not just about giving away material possessions. It is a posture of the heart that is characterized by a willingness to bless and benefit others. So as we talk today, the heart that we want to help you with is you want to be generous because, one, God was generous by giving us Jesus. Yeah. And it's not just, money. And we're talking about time, talents, and treasures as well. And this is very important for us. It's to prove if we have fruit, is that because Jesus talked about money and generosity, 2,000 verses. Can you believe that? Wow. 2,000 verses. He talked about money and possessions, and he talked about it 16 out of his 38 parables. So if he put it in the word that much, I think he wants us as his followers, as his people, to really get this principle.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we just push it to the side. I'm like, well, I'm good with everything else, but this comes at. So that's why Matthew 6, as I set the foundation, then we'll talk, is Matthew 6 says, don't store up your treasures here on earth where moths eat them or rust destroys them and where thieves break them and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy, where thieves cannot break in. Wherever your treasure is, there your desires of your heart will be also. And it talks about you can't serve two masters. You will hate one or love the other. You cannot be devoted to one, or you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. So as we set the foundation, so we all know if we are really born again, following Jesus, we demonstrate generosity. It's one of our fruits.
Yeah.
Like it comes out of us. So with that being said, we'll start the conversation because both of you guys here are generous. You have started in your journey with your faith, and you might have had different, mindsets about it. I don't know how you were taught. What was this process like for you, starting your faith and then becoming a believer and then being generous? and then maybe it was generous and you started tithing, but or no, you didn't. You started with 2%. You started with whatever. What were some reasons why you were generous at first, why you're not? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you developed that trait. So we'll start with you, Mo. Like, tell us how you started with that. Like, what was the process like for you?
So for me, I was raised in a Christian household since I was out the womb. So my parents really like instilled in me the tithing and the meaning behind tithing. So growing up, I knew the obedience behind the tithing. So for me, I always had a budget. Like when I was a kid, I always did my budget, and I would always have a budget envelope for tithing. So whatever I made sure to take my 10% and make sure to put it in the envelope. And I remember, during this time we were moving from church to church. So a lot of times I would have that money just sitting there because I didn't have a home church. And we would do that I had that for years. So when I did find my home church, at the time, I had about $5,000 in tithes, like just collected over time. So I was just like, when I finally found my home church, I was like, so I have to give this 5,000 up. And as a kid, I was like, this is a lot of money, So, but I knew the meaning behind tithing and just the blessing and the obedience that comes with you just being obedient to God. So in that moment, I had a thought to either take this money for myself or to tithe it. And I chose to tithe it at the end of the day because I knew that God's blessing, regardless of if I give this 5,000, it will become even more. And a lot of times it might not be that I'm getting more than 5,000 back, but my life will be blessed because of it. Amen. So that was kind of like my journey on tithing and just the obedience that I had when it came to tithing.
So you were taught and you had the foundation. When did it become real for you and it not be like, oh, this is just something my family did? Was it when you became, obviously you had to demonstrate the generosity and not be like, oh, well, my mom told me to do it, so we're just going to do it. So when did it become like real for you?
I think when I first actually started coming to One Name, well, a little bit before that, once I started having a real relationship with Jesus, because I think a lot of times I just did it just because, I just knew I was going to get blessed. So I was just doing it just to do it. But when I became, when I had a relationship with Jesus, it was like, you know what, I'm doing this just to be obedient and just because I love him. It's not because I want anything in return. It's more of like, I just love God so much that I'm just going to give and trust him with everything that I have. So.
No, that's good. And I think sometimes we can all be like, hey, this is something we just do and not really fully grasp. Like, hey, I was raised in the church and it's something to do, but like, why is God asking this? And how do we really demonstrate the scriptures? Like, this is not just something, a religious activity, but this is like really something I want to do to demonstrate. What about you, Jess? Like, where did you start? What was your process like from starting as a believer and going from, were you generous in the beginning? Were you not?
If I'm honest, I was not. And kind of going back to like how Mo mentioned, I grew up going to the church, and it was back in the day with my mom where they would still pass around the buckets. There was nothing digital. And I can't speak for my mom, right? But I can just imagine when the bucket would pass by, she'll put in like $10 or $20. Back then, the minimum wage was like $4. Yeah. And but regardless, she tithed. I can't speak on her behalf, but me as an adult, when I started going to church, it took me a while to start tithing because I didn't know any better. I didn't know the principles. Like how you mentioned in your sermons, it's not really talked about a lot, because it's such a touchy subject that I was just like, and then when I wouldn't give 10% because like Moses said, when you have, you get your paycheck and then you think about all these other things and you're like, to give away 10%. And it was tough. So sometimes, I would give some here, some there. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? Like I need to pay this credit card or whatever. So I'm going to put money towards that. And that paycheck I wouldn't give. But I would say it was maybe about like 4 years ago that I was like, I started seeing God's hand in my life. And I was like, man, like I really just need to be obedient because if I look back, I've never lacked anything.
Come on.
Like,
Yep.
I'm not a super wealthy person by any means, but I've never gone without. You know what I mean? And that's all God. And he just takes care of us. And I just want to honor his word, because as I'm growing, I'm walking by faith, not by sight. So I'm aligning things in my life based on what his word says, because if it's true, then it's true in my life. So I've just been in that journey where it's like, now it's like, it you know, the money just automatically comes out of my account, you know?
Yeah.
And even to the point that before I used to think that tithing was like, oh, like your paycheck. But now even money that you get blessed with, or extra money that comes in, like a tithe goes out for that too. Like it doesn't, I used to think that it was only like what I would make, but I think it's important that it's like anything that God blesses you with, like that 10% needs to go to his kingdom.
No, that's good. So what would you say, you know, because I think we all have our different journeys, and the reason why I wanted to bring you guys on, because I think sometimes, you know, our testimony, you know, we do this at One Name Church. I teach on it. I teach on generosity, but I think there's a difference between like, okay, I heard Pastor Cord do a great message. It gave me some revelation, to now I have to go apply it. Mm-hmm. Now I have to go. So that's why I want to bring you on to really share these experiences, because I think these are real things. It's like, how do I go from the Word of God, really embracing that, and then actually going to do it? So what would you say to some, you know, maybe that were in the journey like you were, like it was the beginning, I'm trying to figure it out, like I didn't understand, you know, we can get into all of the theological things on the tithe, but we don't have to here because I've talked about it so much. But from your experience, how are you wrestling with that? Like what are some things you can tell if they're just like, oh, I don't know, that you were at where you can, hey, I was there. Like I learned and was there. So how can you help someone if they're where you were? Yeah. What are some things that you can tell them?
I think at the end of the day, it has to do with the intimacy that you build with God.
It's
because my reason to tithe is, yes, the Bible says so, but it's also because I have the fear of the Lord. Like, I want to honor him in every single area. And if that's something that he's calling me to do, I honor him in that. But the only way for me to get the fear of the Lord is to be able to be in intimacy with him and to grow. So that is being in the word, that is learning about him. It's not trying to read scripture to get to the next chapter, but actually looking for him. And that might take you a little bit longer to like read the Bible, because sometimes I'll pick it up and I try to read it in a hurry because I'm like, okay, I got to go to work, you know, but it's actually reading it and, you know, dissecting it. And I think once you start getting to know him more and you build that intimacy with him, he will become extremely real to you. He is real, but I just put that verbiage because that's, you know, what some people would say. But I think once you build that intimacy with him, like you just are being obedient. So I wrestled, but then I wrestled because I was lukewarm. So it wasn't until I actually started diving in and being intimate with God, and God started changing my heart, praying, God, break my heart for what breaks yours. And it wasn't until I kept diving into that I started learning his principles, and I started getting the fear of the Lord, and obedience is now second nature. For the most part, you know, we still struggle, we're human. But that's kind of like my take on that.
No, that's good, because I think that's where it starts. Because really good point, because if you don't have that, then all of the things of God don't flow out of you without the faith, without the relationship. What about you, Mo? What was some of the things that maybe you can tell someone that's kind of where you started to where now, you know, because maybe not just, you know, I know we started talking about the tithe, but like time, talents, and treasure, because you both do this where it's just like you're giving time to the church. Yeah. You're right now giving your talents to the church, and you're giving your treasures to the church, and you're doing all three, because we talked about God wants all three. He doesn't want, it says start with intimacy, like Jess said, but what would you say from your experience has helped you get to this point in your walk?
Honestly, it's just the word. I think like as I dived more deeper with God and my relationship with God, I was able to just know more about God, you know, and know more about, you know, just the obedience and just being generous with my time, generous with my tithe, and just being obedient to him. And I think like it can become really hard, because if you don't have a relationship with God, it's going to be very hard to understand what God is showing you, because a lot of times
good.
we think like, you know what, I have this job and it's providing for me right now, so I don't want to go into ministry because it's going to take time away from my money, the providing aspect, and I don't want that, and a lot of people think, you know what, just because I make this amount of money, I'm gonna be safe here, like it's their safe space, when in reality your safe space
good.
is God. So I think there's no way that you can really like dive deep into this without having a relationship with God first, because everything is gonna kind of go like, this kind of hurts, this doesn't make sense. But I think once you build a relationship with God, everything literally falls into line and makes sense.
That's good, because money is not the answer to your problems. God is, or anything else. So I just think that's good. Like you said, it's like when you have that relationship, when you are intimate, when you're there, I think that's where it starts. And that's why Jesus said, like, where your heart is, your treasure, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So it's so it's just like my treasure goes where my heart is. So it's just like I have to make sure my heart is in line first, because if we want to know what our heart is for, just look at the treasure. So what are some, things, as we talk about this, I think what's hard for people is sometimes, there's these excuses. Like, we want Jesus to be generous to us, right? Like, I want to be blessed. Like, I want to live a blessed life. But it's just, why is it so difficult, I guess, for us, and maybe from your own experiences, for us to be generous? What were some of the things that were holding you back in the beginning from giving your time, talents, and treasures to God? Like, what were some things that holding you back? Like, I hear a lot of time as a pastor, well, I'm busy, I can't serve the church. Or like you said, I got to pay bills, or I got to, I'm using my talent to do something. What are some things from your journey and what do you think that's holding people back from really being fully living this generous life with their times, talents, and treasures? Jess, what would you say?
I think it's just having one foot in and one foot out. I think you have to come and die. We always say that. Like, being born again means like you're going under the water and you're coming out as a new creation. And your old self is dying, and then your new self is here. And a lot of the times we don't want to let go of our old life, because that's all we knew. First of all, stepping into this walk with God is the unknown in a way, but it's the most beautiful thing. But when you first start, you have no idea. So I think it's just not really knowing, and just being like a little bit confused of like what you're going to do.
That's good. What about you, Mo?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like what Jess said. I think a lot of times it's like the world pulls you to, this is better than church. Because even for me, when I was growing up, I always thought, being in church was boring. I always thought, hearing a preaching was boring. I just thought all of it was boring, and the life that I was living was more pleasing to me.
Yeah.
So like for me to even jump into church or a relationship with God, it was just like, why would I do that? You question it, like, this is better right here. But you will never, like, again, I never knew how good God was until I started a relationship with him. So I think it's like, once you start building that foundation with God, you will see and look back at your life and you will be like, man, this is so much better than everything else I had. So once you realize that, it's like, this is where it's at,
So good. I think it starts with us, like we said, these foundational principles. So we do that, we got there, we're moving along, like, okay, now we're demonstrating some generosity, right? You guys have experienced that. Now you're giving, I started with this and then I'm giving a little bit more. How did you guys, and how, to help people, because I think people listening want the practical side. That's why we do the Real Faith, because I can sit here and preach, but what's the practical side? Like, how do you navigate and discern from God on knowing what to give in your time, talents, or treasure? Like, how have you guys navigate, like, okay, God's stretching me to do this when we give the offering, or God's stretching me to serve in this capacity, or God's telling me to give my talent. What have you guys done, or how do you navigate? How can you help someone navigate like what to give, how to be generous, like where to be generous?
Yeah, for me, I'm grateful that the fact that I'm in community has helped me so much, because it's the people in my community that have told me to step out of my comfort zone.
It's good.
It's when I was very comfortable in seasons of my life that I had my friends that were like, hey, you know what? You're not serving a lot. You need to like step it up, but in a loving way, not in a condemning way. So I think the community, no, because it's going back to like being lukewarm and wanting to be in and out of the church at your leisure, you know? And it was, you know, the community that I had that was like, hey, like we need to like step it up. Like, you know, God's calling you higher. Like, you know, God is going to give you as much as you can handle, you know, and sometimes we're asking God for all this stuff, but it's like, but are you doing your part? Are you serving? Are you filling a need where there's a need? So I think it's just like having that community that has helped me get out of my comfort zone. And then I also like pray and fast a lot, you know, whenever I'm going to tithe or whenever I have like any big purchases after $500, like even for myself of personal things that I am going to buy, like I like to like pray and fast about it, because sometimes I don't want to buy something out of like excitement and then it's like a month later I'm not using it. I could have stewarded my money better, you know?
Right.
So those are two things, the community that has helped me, spending time with God and praying and fasting about decisions that I'm going to make.
That's good.
Yep.
What about you, Mo?
I think community is a big part of my life. I think a lot of times I was always I didn't like in it. I was in a crossroad of, you know, is this the right choice? Is this the right choice? And once I stepped into community, it was like, wow, okay, this is the right choice. And they guided me through that. And I think once I reached a point of, you know, I was building a relationship with God, I got close to God, I was able to make those I was able to make those decisions on my own because I was able to hear God's voice. So like the closer I got to God, the clearer his voice was. So I think like just walking into this aspect of, you know what, praying to God, praying to God and being like, God, is this the right choice? Is this the right choice? And the more that you read your word, the more discernment and wisdom that you gain. Amen. So as you walk through this life, it's like knowing, you know what, God, like, help me here. And I promise you, he always gives you an answer. It might not be the next day or the week after. And I think that builds patience in you. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have to understand that he will guide you. It's just making sure that you're close enough to hear his voice.
That's good. Share some of your testimony. I know this is all good stuff. Hopefully you're taking notes. Share some of your testimony of, I know we've talked, and we were talking earlier, but about the time where God asked you to give above and beyond. Maybe like the crazy things that we mentioned, like, okay, hey, I've been tithing. I got that principle down, but now, you know, our church and God is asking to do a above and beyond offering. You know, I can remember the time where God asked me and Jamie, and we were just like, okay, even when we started the church, I need you to just give all your savings. And when God first asked me that, I was like, no way. You know, it's like, what do you mean, God? Like we have, we have nothing. What are we going to do? And, you know, I just remember all the emotions a part of that, the prayer a part of that. Share maybe your experience with moments like that where God was like, hey, I want to stretch your generosity. I want to stretch you. What was the process like? Did you step out in faith? Did you not? What was the wrestle?
Yeah. So a story that comes to mind for me is back in 2023 was a year that my mom had 2 surgeries in the beginning of the year and towards the end of the year. And God knew that I had quit a job out of obedience. And God blessed me that year financially through somebody that was in my life over 12 years ago. And he blessed me with $20,000. Like God knew I needed that. Wow. And I remember when I got that amount of money, I was like, okay, like I started buying people Bibles. I would take a friend out to lunch to tell her about Jesus and tell her, like, I was using it in that aspect, but I never tithe it, right? It goes back to what I said earlier, that in my mind, I'm like, since I didn't work for this, like, I don't need to tithe it. And I remember the end of the year was coming up and I was like looking for a job and I was like, God, like, you've done so much for me this year. And like, now that my mom is healthy, I can actually go back to the workforce. And, I was in my room, like I felt like it was just the other day. I was in my room and I was like praying and I was just like crying out, like I was weeping. I'm like, God, like you've been so faithful, and I know that you blessed me with that money, and you don't have to bless me with money again in that aspect. Like I just need a job and all this stuff. Like what can I do? And then like something in me as I was praying, like the Holy Spirit was just telling me, like I was just praying. I'm like, God, even though I didn't tithe that money, but I got so many people Bibles and I took God. And then God's like, well, you still have that money there, you know? And then like, and then it was like that moment where like, did I hear right? And then I remember going to the envelope that I had, and I had exactly $2,000, which was 10% of the 20. That's all I had left. And like,
So you spent the 90 first and then gave.
and then I pulled one
But
of
God,
like,
you-
but were
yeah.
you sure, God? I was like, are you sure? And like, I immediately opened my Bible. And when I opened my Bible, I guess before I was reading Matthew. So I was in Matthew 25, which is a parable of the servants, where it talked about how God gave 1 5, 1 2, and 1 1. And then I was just like, I read that and I was like, I don't want to be the person that keeps the 1 and stores it for a
Right.
rainy day. And I'm getting goosebumps. I'm saying this. I'm like, I want to
good.
be able to
This is
like
good.
give it. And then I was like, God, no, like absolutely. Like when I go to church tomorrow, like I'm taking this. And I remember seeing you in the hallway and I gave it to you in a pink envelope. I'm like, here. And I'm like, this is a tithe for the church. And I gave the $2,000. But at this point, even though it was hard, because it was at that moment when God put it in my mind, it was hard.
Right.
But as soon as I read the word and it gave me that, I was like, no, like this is 100% from you. And you provided. I just saw you provide me with $20,000. I know you're going to provide. And so I gave it very freely. It wasn't hard for me to give it. And then a month later, I found a full-time job and I've had a job ever since.
Come on.
So he's faithful.
Isn't that crazy though, how God, as you are wrestling with the principle of like tithing off of something that you didn't work for, and you're doing these things, and God like finds you in the middle and
Yeah.
kind of gives you,
Guidance.
because sometimes we just think, oh well, I'll get the principle and I'll just do it. But I think sometimes we do the principle out of just God moving in our life, and it's like through that, doing that, yeah, I didn't give the tithe first like the Bible says, but God got me to that, to reveal that to me. So now I grow into my next season.
Yeah.
It's so crazy how God works in that, to where you still have a testimony to share. That's just a powerful testimony. What about you, Mo? You any experiences on that where God stretched you?
Yeah, I think I remember when me and my wife Gigi, we first got married. We moved in with our parents, and it was we were on a tight budget, because we just came back from our honeymoon. We had to buy stuff to move into the place, so we were just on a very tight budget. And me personally, I wasn't making a lot. Neither was my wife. And I remember Pastor Corey preached a message. It was on the Kingdom Builders, and during that message, I just felt a nudge from God to give $500, and I was like, okay, like that's interesting. So on the ride home, I talked to my wife, and I was like, God really nudged me that he gave me an amount to give and tithe. And she was like, oh, me too. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
I was like, all right. I'm like, in the count of 3, you'll say the amount. And then we literally counted to 3. We said the amount, and it was the same exact amount. And we were
Wow.
like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, And in the moment, it was just like, like this is a lot, because we weren't making a lot, and it was like on a tight budget. So it was like, this might put us back, But at the end of the day, me and her came together, and we went into prayer, we went into the Word, and we were like, this is what we're gonna do, because we knew that, we were gonna get blessed by it. And it's just funny,
It's good.
because I think a lot of times it's God loves to like test us when we don't have a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that it just shows your obedience and your love and your trust for God when you're just obedient to him. And when we were, it was just amazing. Like we were still able to buy our things, go on date nights.
Come on.
And I think that was the time you and Jamie had blessed us with a certain amount of money, and we were like, wow, that's actually pretty crazy that you guys blessed us with that. It was an Amazon gift card. That's what it was. And then we were able to buy a lot with that. So it's just amazing to see God's blessing in hand, like no matter what. So
No, that's so good. I think when you're faithful with the little, God gives you more. So I think there's always, it's not how much you make, but there's always tests. Like I know you've had tests before the 20,000. You've had tests. Can you be faithful with the 2? And I think that's where the test lies, where generosity is really a test to see if we trust God. And I think if we're not being obedient in these areas, I think we're really lacking a trust issue if we really trust God. Because I think all other things I've seen, I trust God with this, God provide this. Like we want God to provide, but when, like we said, when the provider asks us to now, I provided for you so it can go through you to help people.
Yeah.
I think that's where it stops, because we kind of just like provide so we can keep it. But God hasn't called us to be closed-fisted. He's called us to be open-handed. So I think it's just getting to a space like you guys, like these tests of your journey is trust. So now when it's the next step, okay, now like look what God did then. Okay, if I'm not going to trust now, then I forgot.
Yeah.
Like what God did with the 20,000, what God did when we were first married. So I just think all of these things build our faith. So I think if you don't start though, if you're just like staying close-fisted and you don't start being generous, you're never going to grow that generosity. You're never going to get to a space where it's just like now, like I can give, I want to give this away to this person, and you have enough to where it's just easy for you, where you're not even like worrying about it.
Yeah.
You're not even stressing about it. So that's why it says 2 Corinthians 9:6-8. It says, when you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly. And that's not necessarily talking about just money, like I'm getting back more.
Yeah.
It's like I'm reaping the things like, hey, like health and these things. Well, I'm reaping that because, and not just that, I'm just reaping what God, just the blessing of being saved by Jesus. Like I'm thankful for that. Like I'm healthy. So generosity is important. So I'm thankful that you guys shared it, because I think if we're out there listening, we have to make sure that we, put God to the test. Like, are you being generous? Like, we'll leave it with this, because wrap it up here. But as we share our testimonies, is what is something that when we're talking about, I know we talked about money, but when we talked about, let's talk a little bit about time and talent. And as we wrap this up, what are some ways you are generous with your time, and maybe you weren't in the beginning, and your talents, in the church, out of the church, like how have you learned to navigate that? Because when it comes to like treasures, it's sometimes it's just like, oh, I got this money, okay, I'll give this money. But I think with time and talent, there's only the same with money, there's only a certain amount you have, but there's only a certain amount of time you have. But then with talent, you're just like, how you navigate, like, okay, am I using my talent for the Lord? Am I using my talent for myself? What are some things that you guys have done, or ways you've been generous with your time, your talents, in the church, out of the church, that you can help us develop that muscle?
For me, I think that just having a heart for people, like once again, going back to that prayer, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours. And just having a heart for people is what keeps me going every day. Because I know I'm not there for me. Like as the prayer team, when we get there every Sunday, yes, we're all probably, going through something, or we might have our own prayer requests. But every time that we get there Sunday, to set the atmosphere for that day is for that day. And for the people that are walking in, and for our brothers and sisters that are carrying stuff, that need help with somebody stepping in the gap for them. So I think that that's where my hunger comes in and the fire comes in, because I get to do that for someone. Somebody did it for me, and now I get to do that for somebody else. Like I have multiple people that just, they come and they pour out their heart because they feel like it's a safe space. So for me, it's the community and the people that I get to serve. The same thing with going to serve days outside of church. At first, before I was in the prayer team, if I'm being honest, I probably went to one serve day. I know we have them like quarterly. But then after I joined the prayer team and my heart just started, like God just started working in my heart. And now we go to one of the organizations that all we do is pray for people. Like we're there from like 8 a.m. to like 12, over 250 families pass by. So like just being there, I sometimes go home and take the longest nap because I poured out so much, but yet like God has filled me so much in that. So I think it's like that's just what I love about like serving with my time, is that I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for others. Because as I'm serving others, God is also filling me. And it just stirs my faith. And anything, like I'm always like hungry for God. I'm always trying to find ways for my faith to be stirred, because sometimes that you're not always on fire, if you're being honest. You know, the enemy is active. So for me, serving and being plugged in is how I keep that fire lit.
That's good.
So.
Yeah, it's the compassion moves us to action. I think as you are sharing, like God is moving in you to grow your compassion for those around you.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that compassion, it'll move you to do the things that are just like, man, I spent all day praying for people, or I did that. And I think that's where you don't look back and say, I've wasted time.
Yeah.
Or, oh my gosh, I was here. And you're just like, no, you feel more filled up, like you said. That's good. What about you, Mo? What are some, your time and your talents, using for God? You have the ability to speak that you didn't even know you had, and it came out of you. And then like your time, like serving at the church, spending all this time with the youth. Yeah. What got you there?
Just literally just being obedient to God, taking my first step. And as I took that first step, is like God was pruning me, God was ripening me. And as I stepped into youth ministry, I didn't know that I could be, I could preach until God like showed me that was my calling. And I remember just stepping into youth ministry and just seeing the joy that I had, seeing these kids just have such a fire for God, such a willingness to learn. And this generation is hard to come by. So just seeing that these youth kids go through so much, and me just having my time open for them and seeing their hearts changed is everything. Because yeah, it takes time, it takes effort, and sometimes you are exhausted and tired, but there is a joy that comes out of just pouring into people regardless, and just seeing how their life changed and having that unconditional love that Jesus had for us. Because if it wasn't for Jesus, we wouldn't have that same love. We have that same love because of Jesus. So I think it's just showing that and seeing the fruits that come out of that. And even though that you might not even see the fruits, but knowing that every seed that is planted will be watered one day. So it's just knowing that. So
no, that's good, because I think most people don't get that, and they're miserable in their, because they're using their talents to just collect a paycheck. They're using their time just to waste it on things that don't matter. And I think that's where people fall empty and not fulfilled, like you were talking about, Jess, because they're wasting it on things. And even with money, it's like, I spent all this money on things and it didn't, the return, there's no reaping, or it's reaping the things that we want in the flesh, but we're still feeling empty inside. So I think that generosity is such a key to being able to be fulfilled in doing the Lord's work. So if we're calling ourselves a follower of Jesus, like we need generosity, like not just to do it so we can be blessed, but we need generosity to fulfill us, to energize us. We say at One Name Church, like generosity is our passion. Yeah. Like we're just passionate about this. It keeps the fire lit. It keeps us passionate about the Lord. Keeps us running after the things when we are generous with our time, talents, and treasures. It is something that just fills us up. So
yeah, and I want to add to that real quick, because we're talking about our talents, and that's why I think going into intro to the family is so important, because just like how I have a hunger, and like for me, prayer is where I've been the most flourishing. And Mo, with like the youth ministry, like intro to the family is so important, because it gives everybody an opportunity to see what inside the church, because not everybody has the same talent. Like I served kids ministry for a few years at a previous church, but when I came into that, I was like, you know what, that's in my past. We're stepping into something new. And then I started serving because I was like, let's just start serving in X department. I'm not going to name the name. No, because the name, okay, well, hospitality. So I started serving in hospitality.
They're not the X department. They're the great department.
They're amazing. But my heart, like God had something bigger and he started shifting, you know? And I think we need to be obedient to where God moves us. And Intro to the Family will introduce you to the different places where you can serve. So that way you can then pray about it and see where God wants you to be, because your talents can be used in so many different areas of the church.
Yeah, and I think I love that, because I think sometimes we feel like we come in with a resume and a job description to serve God's house, and the reality needs to be wherever you want me, God. If it's kids this season, if it's hospitality this season, if it's prayer team this season, like your will be done. And I think that's where generosity is, because I think it's not generous to come in and just say, hey guys, I serve and this is my talent, but this is what I only do. You know what I mean? Like if you're only using your talent to do what you want to do, then you're really missing out the point. Or you're unaware that that's your talent. Like people come into the church and say, I can sing. And then we're like, we have to tell you, you can't sing because you're not your talents. You're trying to take someone else's reason why people are not generous with their talents is because they're trying to they think there's something that they're not, or they think there's someone else, and it becomes comparison. So it's a good point that you say that, because I think we really have to align with, okay, God, I want to be generous with my time and my talents, but I really have to identify my spiritual gift. Like you said, Intro to the Family, doing these things, going to our walk track step 3 will help people identify that, so you can really do this effectively. Yeah. This is all good stuff. Come on, somebody. We can go for hours on this, and I'm just thankful for you guys. Like, you are demonstrating what it is to be generous with your time, your talents, and your treasures. So if you're out there listening, like you said, get in community. This is how you grow this. This is how you be like, well, how can I spend more time serving others? Or how can I give a tithe? How can I be above and beyond? Like they said, like, it's in community. That's where I've learned. That's where we've learned how to get better at this and really get revelation on God's word coming to life, and not just doing it because someone told us to do it. So get into community, continue to be a part of what we're doing. We have so many things to help you grow in this area, our Generosity University, so many cool things that you can get a part of. But hopefully this has helped you today on being generous. Let compassion move you to action, and let's go out and show the world who Jesus is by our generosity, because it's our passion. We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Real Faith Conversations from One Name Church. For more information or to connect with us, visit onename.church or follow us on our socials at One Name Church.